So I came across this actually, and this is something that actually pissed me off enough to make a video about it. What you've got here, this is in The Guardian, which is perceived as being a very credible publication. It says high-fat Mediterranean diet does not cause weight gain, study finds. And this was a direct backlash about saying that actually, well, if people consume far too much fat, they get fat, which is kind of blindingly obvious. But when these things come out in newspapers and journals and so on, people go, oh, well, maybe I'm wrong, and it just adds to the confusion. So what you've got here is it's saying that this major study has found that if you consume olive oil and nuts, it doesn't cause people to gain weight. And okay, well, let's go into a little bit of detail. And this is a kickback about this stuff here, and lots of people resigned over this stuff, and so on and so on, and blah blah blah. Anyway, this comes on the back of this Predamed study, which is a study I think it's based out of Spain. I think it ran for about 8 years or something like that in sort of the early part of the 2000s up to about 2010 or 2011, something like that. Anyway, so the purpose of this is, and this comes from the Lancet, so it's pretty credible and so on. But anyway, the point with this, they were showing what people were eating, and they gave, one control group, they could eat whatever they want. Another one was put on quite a very low fat diet, so sort of around about 10-15% of calories from fat. And then this group were given a litre of a week of oil for them and their family, and some got the nuts as well. So the interesting thing about this is that you've got people here who are already overweight, and they said, oh, well, weight loss wasn't substantial. Greatest in the group with the olive oil. So wow, okay, people think that's fantastic. But actually, if you start to read into a bit more detail about this, all of the groups increase their weight management. They say which tends to happen with people's age. Well, yeah, maybe, but that's not a good thing. That's just a correlation, saying that as people get older, they get fatter. But that shouldn't be the case. And when you look at these populations around the world that are really healthy, they don't get fat when they get old. This is a Western problem. It is absolute bullshit. But anyway, it went on to talk about this and so on, and all these types of things and blah blah blah. So what I thought was interesting is, well, let's have a look at the actual study. And I've opened these tabs already for brevity because I thought it was quicker. This is in the Lancet, which it seems great. It seems like a very credible organisation, which it is. But the thing that I found was fascinating about this, when you go into detail of this, it talks about a Predamed study and all this 5-year parallel, blah blah blah, and all this kind of stuff. You can go into it. I didn't buy this. I cancelled my subscription to a Lancet for good reason. But look who's funded this. You just take a second and look at that. You've got the Walnut Commission, Morella Nuts, and an oil company. So you've got oil company and nut companies. So what do you expect them to say about the consumption of olive oil and nuts? Crazy. And I looked at this organisation up, and I think I've seen it years ago. And I looked up, and there's loads of these. There's tons of them. This is the kind of data we've got to be careful about, because with the right money, they can end up in these organisations. And then it goes out as a paper. So I thought, well, let's keep it simple, and let's just get down to business with this. What's actually going on? And so I thought, well, let's look at this. So you look at olives, for example. Let's take olives. Are they good or bad for you? Because some people don't know. Well, I take a serving size of 100 grams, and I'll do that with all of these things, just to give it a good comparison. And you see 115 calories and fat 89. So they are high in fat, absolutely. But it's mostly monounsaturated fat. It's not a saturated fat. No cholesterol. They're high in sodium, absolutely. Got quite a bit of fibre in them as well. They say it's a glycemic load of 1. It's what it is. And then they sort of break down of macronutrients here and about how full they're going to make you and how nutritious they are. So they kind of sit sort of mid-table. And then you look at this sort of completeness score when you look at, you've got the vitamins here and then the minerals here and the protein score as well. So it scores really well in terms of particularly minerals and protein. So olives are quite good in that sense. So you've got this whole package there, which is nice. And you look at this, okay, so you're going to get some A and some E and K and all this sort of thing, but not great quantities of it. But where these olives really excel is in their minerals, and that's fantastic. and particularly with the fibre as well, and all these types of things that you're going to get. The omega profile of it is not great. Yes, there's some omega-3, but very little, and the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 is terrible with respect to what is optimal. So olives on their own, I think, are pretty good. You're unlikely to overeat really on them, although if you buy a can of them, it's probably fairly easy to. But when you compare olives as a whole food to olive oil, look at the difference. So per 100 grams, 884 versus 100 grams, 115. So it's like it's 7.5, 8 times as many calories. But the calories from fat is 884. So it's 100% fat. That's what you get. And the macronutrient pyramid here shows you exactly that. It's not filling, it's not nutritious at all in any sense. It's pure fat, very high in saturated fat. Bear in mind when we looked at the olive, saturated fat 100 grams was 1, and now we're looking at 14. So that's a huge difference. I'm not talking about double or quadruple here, way higher than that. The sodium is quite a bit lower. So what we've done here is we've taken this whole food, this olive, and someone's pressed it purely to extract just the oil from this. And when you look at this, what's happened is you lost all that protein, and you've lost almost all of that profile of the vitamins and minerals. And so what you're now consuming essentially is a junk food. You've lost all of this here. Yeah, there's some vitamin E in there, but you'd have to consume a lot of it to get the amount you need. You'd have to consume well over 1,000 calories of just oil to get it. And that's pure fat. That's what you'd be taking in, and that's crazy. And remember this this gorgeous little panel that we saw here. This one on the minerals. Look at this, and it's just gone. It's just completely gone, and that's problematic because people are thinking that if they consume olive oil, it's healthy. But really it isn't. When you strip it back, all the marketing, and look at the actual data, it's terrible. So I think really there's a few things to be said from this. First of all, the article is misleading at best. And at worst, it's absolutely lying to people with commercial interest there. Nothing but that. But people who are intelligent and educated will still get misguided by this because of the publication it's in. And this is not unique. I picked on this one just because I spotted it. But there's so many others like this. And people say, oh, well, so, okay, it's a lot of calories, but is it a problem? Well, it is actually. And this is a credible paper, and I'll tell you why, because this has been cited by so many other authors as well, and experts and peers in the field. And this was something which has been repeated so many times. There's a cardiologist called Robert Vogel. And this paper has no conflict of interest, and it's showing what happens when people consume high-fat meals, which if you put olive oil on anything, you're then consuming a high-fat meal. And these are the sorts of things where they sort of put olive oil and bread, things that people will have in a restaurant, and looked at what happened to people's arteries. And it was really interesting, really interesting to see. And they call this brachial artery flow-mediated vasodilatation, which is saying if you are to measure somebody's blood flow in their wrist or somewhere below their shoulder with an ultrasound and measure the blood flow by looking at the diameter of the artery, and then cut off that blood flow using a tourniquet so that the arm goes numb for 5 minutes, then releasing it and seeing what happens to the artery. Does it bounce back to the original size? Does it get bigger to compensate? Or does it not get back to the original size? And this experiment's been repeated so many times, so many times. The oil companies certainly don't like this one. And they've tried to get around it, but they can't, because it simply happens all the time. It happens in everybody. And when you look at these things, when you look at the actual data there, it's really strong. It's powerful. They talk about some limitations in here and so on. You can read this. This one's free, of course. But the interesting thing is this. It's looking at what happened after people were eating. So it's just after 3 hours compared with what happened if they didn't eat. And we know that you eat certain foods like kale and so on will dilate your arteries. They'll cause them to get bigger, more blood flow, and so on due to predominantly factors such as increase in nitric oxide in the blood, affecting the endothelial cells. But the reverse happens with the oil. It's actually saying it's decreased massively. Look at this at time, hugely, and the amount of triglycerides has gone up. Really bad. So when people talk about this high-fat Mediterranean diet being good, no, it's not. And that's why you tend to find that actually around all these Mediterranean countries, people are getting fat and sick in the same way as they are where I am, which is in the UK. So olive oil is not a good thing. Where the Mediterranean diet is good is it's high in fruits and vegetables, and that's what people want to be basing their meals around, having lots and lots of fruits and vegetables and unrefined starches such as potatoes and rice and beans and corn and these sorts of foods, not olive oil. In fact, no oil. So all extracted oils will follow a very, very similar nutritional profile to this, which is of a junk food. In fact, if you were to compare this to what people might perceive as a junk food, perhaps a McDonald's meal, actually it's going to have a better nutritional profile than this. So that's really where we are. I wouldn't advise you consume either of them, but you'd be more healthy looking at something like a McDonald's than you would the olive oil. And that's the situation that we live in. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you find that interesting. You know, I don't want to slate people too much, but when you see this kind of crap coming out, I think it's important to speak up and show people some unbiased information, perhaps, and particularly those nutritional profiles. That's really, really important. And you look at this, you think, oh my gosh, what are people doing? Anyway, thanks for watching. Much appreciated. Cheers.